Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for Tuesday, May 7th, 2019. On today's episode, we're going to talk about what we've been up to at the Watercooler. This is Slash Film Editor-in-Chief Peter Sciretta. Joining me on this podcast is Slash Film Managing Editor Jacob Hall.
Hello, hello.
Weekend Editor Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
Senior Writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
And Writers Hoai-Tran.
Hey, everyone.
And Chris Evangelista. Chris?
Chris
Sorry,
here?
I was on mute. Sorry. Hello, I'm here.
Chris, is this an extension of your computer problems?
Yes, it is. I'm sorry. I'm not.
What has been going on with your computer?
All right, so I have a MacBook Pro, and I don't know if anyone else is aware of this, but certain models of the MacBook Pro, they have a faulty keyboard that tends to stick, and Apple has acknowledged this. Not only have they acknowledged this, but they offer to replace the keyboard for free if you have a certain model, which I do. So I'd been putting up with it for a while, but I was sort of like, enough is enough, because obviously I use my computer every day for work. So I made an appointment at my local Apple store on last Saturday, and I went in there and I told him the story, and the guy was very helpful. The Genius Bar guy was very helpful. He was like, oh, no problem. We can replace this for you in 24 hours, free of charge. I was like, great. So he says, all right, but first I have to run this diagnostic test. And I'm like, fine, not a problem, because as far as I knew, the computer, other than the keyboard, was fine. There was no problem with the computer. So he runs his diagnostic test and he goes, this thing is saying there's a problem with your, I don't know what he called it, some sort of board, something with board in the title. So I said, oh, that's odd, because the computer is working fine. And he said, yeah, but this problem could eventually become a serious problem. We have to fix this too. And I said, can we just ignore this and just fix the keyboard, because that's all I care about? And he said, no, our policy is, we have to fix everything, which sounds like bullshit to me, but whatever you say, Apple. So he was like, we can fix this, but it's going to take, 5 business days. And I really didn't want to do this because, again, I use my computer for work, but I have this old crappy laptop. And I figured, all right, I'll use my old crappy laptop while they're fixing this, because, again, he said the warranty is going to cover this. Everything is free, 100% free. And you can't beat free, folks. So I said, fine. So this was Saturday. Yesterday,
apparently you can beat free.
Yes. So yesterday I get an email from Apple that says your repair is on hold, and I'm like, uh-oh, what is this about? So I log in, and it says, while we were fixing your computer, we noticed water damage. Now, I don't want to accuse Apple of lying, because I don't think they're lying, but I know for a fact I have never spilled anything on this computer. I've never gotten this laptop wet. There's no reason it should have any water damage. And again, it was working perfectly fine except for the keyboard. It wasn't like it wasn't turning on. It wasn't like it was running slow. Everything was fine. So I call at the Apple store. I say, what is going on here? Why is my thing on hold? I need this computer back. And they say, well, because of the water damage, that voids everything. And now, instead of being free, you have to pay $650. So this has jumped from $0 to nearly $700 in the span of 48 hours. And
see, there's these indicators that are inside your computer that they're like these little circles that change color if there's, quote unquote water damage. But I think they can be set off even by a lot of humidity.
Right, and I wouldn't even be surprised if it was something like that. Again, I don't think Apple is lying. I just think they have this hard line here, and they refuse to budge. So I was like, look, I know I didn't cause any water damage. Please just fix my computer. And they said, again, they gave me that same party line of, we can't fix one thing. We have to fix everything. And I practically was begging them. I was like, please, just fix the keyboard. That's all I want. And this guy was clearly reading off a cue card where he just kept saying the same thing robotically over and over again. And it was driving me nuts. And so he was like, your only options are you can either pay something like $650 or just cancel everything and we'll send the computer back to you. And obviously I don't want to pay $650. So I said, screw it. Send me my computer back. And that was sort of the end of it, but I was so angry. I was like, you know what? I'm calling like the main Apple line. I'm going to try and get another answer. So I call up.
You asked for Tim Cook?
Yeah, he was not in, so they transferred me to someone else, and this person was like, "Oh, I need to kick you up to a senior person." I was like, "Fine." So they kicked me up to a senior person. This senior person listens to my whole story, my whole song and dance, and then she says, "Oh, I need to kick you up to a senior person." I was like, "I thought that's what you were," and she was like, "Yeah, but I need someone above me." And this went on for like 40 minutes. I finally get to someone else. She listens to my whole story. She says, "Man, this is, I understand why you're upset. I don't know what I can do for you. Let me talk to my manager." And at this point, I was grinding my teeth down to powder, but I was hoping for some sort of answer. So she said, "I'm going to put you on hold. I'll get back to you." She puts me on hold for literally a full hour because, the phone has the timer at the top. So, it showed me how long I was on the call. After an hour, nothing happened, at which point it was like 10:30 at night, and I said, "I'm done," and I hung up. So that's where I am right now, boiling with rage, waiting for my unfixed computer to come back. End of story.
That is awful, Chris.
Yeah, that is, I'm so sorry to hear that.
And, I know this is like a very first world problem. I know there are people with much more serious problems than my expensive computer won't work. But again, this is my livelihood. This is how I do my job. And now I am not only is the computer not fixed, the whole endeavor was useless. I might well have just kept it here and dealt with the shitty keyboard rather than be down a good computer for a few days. Because now I'm stuck using this junker until the other comes back. But now I'm also paranoid. The crappy, the one I took in is going to not turn on now because it has this miraculous water damage that it didn't have before. So I'm on edge right now, just waiting to figure out what's going to happen.
I wouldn't worry about that. I think it's going to come back fine. It's just they should fix the keyboard. Like, I don't know. I have a clicky key on mine because I have one of the laptops affected, but I have not wanted to give up my computer for a few days. You know what I mean? Like.
Yes, and take it from me, just don't. Just deal with the. What I think I'm going to do is when this comes back, provided it turns out, I'm just going to go out and buy an external wireless keyboard because that's obviously a simpler task than having to go through Apple support, who are terrible. I will say in the past I've dealt with Apple support and they've been very helpful. This is like the first time they were just terrible, but this entire experience has soured me on their product. So thanks a lot, Apple.
So Tim Cook, if you're listening to Slash Film Daily, Chris is unhappy.
Yeah, you owe me. Call me up, Tim Cook.
Okay, we have not recorded a Watercooler episode in, I think, over 2 weeks. This episode is usually where we talk about what we've been up to, what we've been doing. We've already had Chris go on a rant for 6 minutes about his Apple problems. But let's start with what we've been doing. I've been spending a lot of time making video blogs for this new YouTube channel. I think I mentioned this on the podcast. It's called Ordinary Adventures. We started a YouTube channel, me and Kitra, and we're going on adventures to theme parks and other movie type events. Our first video was a trip to the Avengers Endgame world premiere. So if you've never been to a world premiere of a movie, you get to experience what that is like. And we also went to Disneyland. This past week, though, I went to Disneyland yet again to do a couple of events, and we had the worst possible thing happen to us. We spent a day filming, and all of the audio was near unusable. It just came out so badly. It was complete user error on my part. I had replaced the camera. We had to replace the camera, and I moved the wind muff from one camera to the other, and somehow that was installed wrong, and the audio all came out horrible. We still were able to turn one of the videos into a highly edited with voiceover video, which is on the channel. But I would love, if you're listening to this, to head on over to our YouTube channel. It will be linked in the show notes. It's called Ordinary Adventures, and give us a subscribe and check us out. I think today, at some point, or maybe tomorrow, we will be putting an unboxing video. I did an unboxing video of like we all get a lot of movie swag sent to us from the movie studios, and I had a buildup of boxes of movie swag, so we decided to do a mystery unboxing of all this movie swag, and I'm giving away some of it to people who watch. So check that out on Ordinary Adventures on YouTube.com. Our trip to Disneyland was actually to experience one of Disneyland's After Dark events. They've been doing these After Dark events, which are kind of these separate ticketed events where you pay about $110. You get to enter the park after it is closed for the night. So I think we got this event started at 9 and ran till 1 a.m. And this was a Marvel's Heroes Assemble themed event. So they had a lot of character meet and greets out throughout Disney California Adventure, some of which are normally in the park, some of which are not. So like Iron Man was there, and all the Disney characters like Chip and Dale were dressed as Loki and Thor, and a bunch of just opportunities that you don't usually get with the characters. There was themed food around the land. There was a hunt for there was churro carts around this park, and each of the churros was themed after one of the Infinity Gems. So you could collect them all, and you wouldn't get anything, but you'd collect them all and have a good photo op with them. There was throughout the land, it was just cool atmosphere, some like non-character oriented photo ops, which we did a bunch of, and there was just the Marvel theme music, like just from all the films running throughout the land, and it was fun. Me and my friend John were trying to guess at what the themes are as they started. It was a fun atmosphere. The rides were walk-ons for most rides, but I feel like a lot of these people are already annual pass holders, and to pay $110 for an event like this, people are mostly going for this unique food, the photo ops, and the character meet and greets, and a lot of those were just really long lines. It was just spent waiting in line. Like I think Iron Man's line was over 2 hours long at some points, and most of the things to do, if you wanted to meet up with even Spider-Man, who is normally in the park, but he was at a different photo op booth, like a different backdrop than he normally is, even his line was like a half an hour long. So you only have 4 hours, but I don't know, I feel like Disney has to get a hold of that if they're going to keep on doing these after park events. Like they did one a month ago for 90s night, and I know there was like 3 hour long line for Darkwing Duck to meet Darkwing Duck and Max from the Goofy movie. So like it's just insane. Disney fans are insane. They're gonna pay this money. I had a lot of fun because it was the company I was with, the friends I was with. It was a lot of fun, but I'm not sure if this is worth it, especially if you're an annual pass holder, because then you're paying an extra $100+ just for a 4 hour event. But so yeah, did that. And then I went to the AMA Awards, which is basically the Oscars of Magic, the Academy Awards of Magic. And this is held every year by the Magic Castle. This time it was held in the parking lot of the Magic Castle, and it was a lot of fun. It was a fun night in the castle. Afterwards, we got to see a bunch of shows. Two of the shows in particular were the most interesting. They had some of my favorite magicians, Jared Koff and Hannibal. They were channeling the spirits of Vernon and Orson Welles, and that was fantastic. So I actually got to see Orson Welles, who at some time actually did perform magic, and I got to see him basically rise from the grave and be reprised by Hannibal in full makeup and get up, and tell stories as Orson Welles and do some of Orson's magic tricks. It was actually a lot of fun to see. So and I also got to meet Michael Ammar, who is the guy who I watched as a child. I watched his VHS tapes, the Easy to Master Card Miracle series, and he was the guy that taught me magic as a child, and I got to go up to him and shake his hand and get a photo with him, which was just so great for me. It was a lot of fun, and that's what I've been doing. HT, what have you been up to?
For the past 2 weeks, I've been covering the Tribeca Film Festival, and that is the film festival created by Robert De Niro that takes place in New York. And I got to do a couple. I will talk about the movies that were highlights from the festival a little bit later, but I did get to do a couple of events outside of just watching movies and being tired.
Yeah.
But I got to experience a Doctor Who VR film called The Runaway because Tribeca has this great virtual reality / tech hub, which I don't usually go to a lot, but they had a Doctor Who one, so I couldn't resist. Outside of the Doctor Who little area, they had a TARDIS, which was very cool. I'd made a couple of strangers take pictures of me in front of it, and I got to see the film, which was actually an animated film, which was really interesting. But it had Jodie Whittaker voicing the role with another actress who did the physical sort of movements for it. And it basically takes you on an adventure with a doctor in which you have somehow bumped your head and you wake up in the TARDIS, which is her time-space machine. And they are... The spaceship is under attack, and she is trying to spirit this creature back to its home planet. But they're being chased by several, I don't know, soldiers or something. But it's a lot of fun, and it's only, I think, 13 minutes long. But it's a really great. It's just a blast to experience and watch, and you get to use the sonic screwdriver, which was very cool. I was just like a giddy fangirl the entire time, so that was great. I also attended, this is towards the latter half of the festival, I attended the Reality Bites 25th anniversary panel. Fun fact, I actually have never seen Reality Bites before, despite loving the entire cast of this movie. And it's a Gen X movie. It's the pivotal Gen X film, so it's not exactly my generation, but watching this movie, it is very just universal in terms of its depiction of that aimlessness of post-grad life and the 20-somethings of the Gen X generation, but every generation really. And Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke, and Ben Stiller were at the panel for this, as well as the writer for this film, Helen Childress. And it was a lot of fun to see them just kind of banter through the panel. Ethan Hawke was not as pretentious as I thought he would be. I say pretentious in a loving way because I really enjoy his philosophical ramblings, as you diplomatically would say. But he and Ben Stiller just kind of bickered and kind of riffed with each other the entire time. And Winona Ryder was just having a great time, being gushed about by the rest of the cast and the producers and crew. So it was a lot of fun, and it was just so great to see all three of them on stage. I love Winona and Ethan especially, so it was exciting to see that and finally see Reality Bites. And I'll talk a little bit more about the rest of the highlights of the Tribeca Film Festival later, but that is what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks.
While you've been at a film festival, Ben has been traveling internationally. Ben, what have you been up to?
Yeah, I went to London for this movie called Tolkien that's coming out this Friday. It's a biopic of the author behind The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. And it's weird to go on a set visit just a few days basically before a movie comes out. But it was more, I don't know, it was a strange set visit because it's not like we watched any filming. It was basically just like a junket overseas. So they held it in London. I got to interview the cast, which included Nicholas Hoult and Lily Collins, and just go to a bunch of the different locations where they filmed the movie and also where the actual real Tolkien actually lived and worked. So I'm putting together a video of this and it'll be up on the site, I think, this week. So I'm not going to talk too much about it, but it was cool. We got to go to this bar called the Eagle and Child, which is where it was in Oxford, which is an hour train ride outside of London. But it's this really small town where there's Tolkien taught and went to Oxford University and taught at a college there. And he hung out in this bar with other writers of the era, like C.S. Lewis. He was in this literary group called the Inklings. So it was just cool being in this really super old bar where these titans of the literary industry used to just hang out and drink and recite their work to each other while it was in progress and all that. We actually got a tour of the area that was delivered to us given to us by a student of Tolkien's. So that was pretty cool to have that one-on-one connection with somebody who actually studied under him. So yeah, keep your eyes out on slashfilm.com for more from that. So then I also saw my favorite band, The Midnight, in concert this past Friday night. So that was an amazing experience. I don't think I've ever seen my favorite band live before at any point in my life. I've always, I've seen many, many concerts, especially in my younger days, but it was never like the passion never fully lined up. It was always like, oh yeah, I really like this band or whatever, but the timing never worked, where the band that I was obsessed with at that moment never was in my town. But in LA, I mean, every band comes through here on tours and stuff like that. So yeah, I had the opportunity to see The Midnight, which was incredible. They're, for those of you who don't know them, they're a synthwave band. So it's sort of like this retro, like think about the score for the movie Drive. That's the kind of vibe that they have. And it was unbelievable. And like the saxophone player in the band, oh yeah, there's a saxophone player, got down into the crowd, and like, my wife and I were like second row or something, and the sax player was like right there next to us, just like shredding on the sax in the crowd. It was unbelievable. So check them out, The Midnight. That's my favorite band. They're incredible. Has anybody else heard of The Midnight, by the way? Anybody know them?
I have not heard of them at all, but I'm going to add them to my Apple Music now, and let's give them a listen.
They are awesome. Okay, and then so this week, so that was Friday night, and then Saturday I went to the Peterson Automotive Museum in LA for the opening of a new exhibition called Hollywood Dream Machines, which is they have like almost 50, or I guess just over 50 vehicles on display from all sorts of different sci-fi and fantasy TV shows and movies. They actually have a video game vehicle, or a couple of video game vehicles there too, which is really weird to see. They have like a speeder thing from the game Destiny, and also a Warthog from the Halo franchise, which is like it's like essentially like an off-road Jeep kind of thing with a gun.
Why did they create like real vehicle? Like, is this for commercials or something?
I have no idea why they were there, but they were like full scale, like huge. The Warthog thing was massive, because the characters in Halo, I think, are Master Chief anyway, I think is supposed to be like larger than a normal human, or at least like the suit that he's in. So the vehicle therefore is larger because they're like driving around in this thing. Anyway, it's huge. I took a ton of video of that, and I'll put together something for that on the site, and that should also be up this week. So there were incredible vehicles there, and I wasn't really expecting too much, just like, oh cool, yeah, a bunch of vehicles in a room, but the layout is really, really impressive, and they have a bunch of stuff, like tons of stuff from Blade Runner. They actually had Peter and Brad, I know you guys in particular will appreciate this, they had one of the original speeders from A New Hope from Star Wars there, so that was pretty crazy to see. And it's like some vehicles from Mad Max Fury Road, which was pretty awesome. So yeah, tons of like surprising stuff that I wasn't really expecting to be there. One of the things they also had was the time machine from Back to the Future, and Bob Gale was there, who's the co-writer and producer of that Back to the Future trilogy. And I got to meet him. My wife Amy and I just sort of like pulled him aside after he did this little panel discussion, and we just got to talk to him for a couple minutes and thank him for the Back to the Future trilogy. And we actually showed him a picture of Amy has this shirt of Doc Brown making this really hilarious face when the model that that he creates in the first movie catches on fire. So she has this shirt with his face on it, and we got to show Bob Gale that shirt, and he laughed and told us about the filming of that moment. So it was just a really cool like fan moment that we had of getting to meet the creator of one of our favorite properties.
And that Hollywood Dream Machines exhibit at Peterson Automotive is now open. So I think you can see that. I think it's open 10 to 6 every day. So
yeah, and it's going to be open from now until March 15th, 2020. So it's actually right across the street from the Academy's Museum. That's still under construction right now, but I think the Academy Museum is supposed to be open later this year. So that would be a really cool, if you're like visiting Los Angeles, for example, later in this year after the Academy Museum opens, that would be a really, really cool like 1-2 punch right across the street from each other to visit those two things.
Yeah, very cool. Jacob, I know you've been trying to read a bunch of stuff. What have you been reading this week?
Although I've essentially abandoned my book a week plan just due to life things, I did pick up a new book that's really ideal for my current situation, which is kind of I can pick up and put down and skim through at my leisure, and that is The President by Brian Lamb, Susan Swain, and C-SPAN. Yes, C-SPAN is a credited author on this book. And what it is every decade or so, C-SPAN does this massive survey of all the top historians in the United States to rank all the presidents. And this book, where all the profits go to charity, is literally a ranking of the presidents, where all the historians are given a list of elements to which they can award each president points. So you pull up that page and tell you what they're judging the presidents on. Public persuasion, crisis leadership, economic management, moral authority, international relations, administrative skills, relations with Congress, vision and setting an agenda, pursued equal justice for all, and performance within the context of the times. So I think it's 100 points per category they can reward, up to 1,000 points. And who wants to guess who ranked number one?
George Washington.
He's number two. Number one was Abraham Lincoln with 907 points. And it's a really interesting book because each section has the overall rank, a brief summary of their presidency, and then and not quite an essay, but a edited interview with the historian who specializes in that president, where they've removed all the questions and transformed the interview into sort of a spoken essay about that president. So, for example, George Washington's chapter is an interview with Ron Chernow, who wrote the definitive George Washington biography. So it's always 20 to 30 page essays for each president to go over the entire history of what they did in office, spoken by an expert, edited by C-SPAN authors and editors and people who know this stuff. And it's so far I've only read a few of the sections. I read Lincoln, and I read the very last, the dead last president, who's not Trump because he can't be fully scored yet. But who wants to guess who the dead last president is?
Donald Trump. I know you said he's not in there, but we all know that's the actual answer.
Nixon?
George W. Bush.
It's James Buchanan, who was president right before the Civil War and did not prevent it, and has therefore been ranked dead last for most of these surveys. Yeah, it's a really, really cool book because it's literally the history of all the presidents in one hardcover book. Each essay is pretty bite-sized. If you don't want to read an entire, autobiography or biography of Warren G. Harding, here's 20 pages, what you need to know. And it's just a really, really cool thing. You can pick up and put down and choose which president you want to read about and see how they all stack up against each other. And if you like history and you like, being able to browse about a really easy to read book, it is incredibly fun, and I'm enjoying it a lot.
Jacob, that seems so much like your thing, like the combination of history and ranking and comparing and all of that stuff. It just seems like it was made specifically for you.
Yeah, I stumbled across it. I picked it up immediately, and I haven't. Interestingly, at the same bookstore trip, I also picked up a book. Oh goodness, I don't have it near me. I don't know what the title is, but literally, it's a series of essays where each essay is about a president who was not elected, as in a vice president who took over office when a president died or was assassinated, and it discusses in depth what happens to a presidency when the people did not pick that person and how that leader reacts. And I'm very excited to dig into that eventually too.
That sounds interesting. Ben, what have you been reading?
I've been reading a new book, or a forthcoming book, called Game of Thrones: The Storyboards, which were drawn by a guy named William Simpson, and the book was sort of co-written by Michael Kyogi. Most of the pages here have basically at least 12 panels, so there's a lot of storyboards. The entire book is just, it collects storyboards from the entire first 7 seasons of the show, and that's the only ding that I have against it, is that it doesn't include anything from season 8, and this is the definitive book of storyboards, and it's just missing just 6 episodes of stuff at the very end. So I wish they could have found a way to maybe release this a little bit later and include season 8 stuff in there, so it doesn't feel like it's missing an integral part of the story, because you just don't get the ending. And this book comes out later this month, so I think I'm looking at HBO's website right now, and it has the book on there, and it says that pre-orders ship on May 28th, 2019. That's after the show is over, so I feel like they could have included season 8 stuff, but maybe for the press aspect of it. They wouldn't want that information out there because typically books like that will send, like they did in this case, will send out copies to the press so we can have a chance to check it out and sort of tell people about it, evangelize about it beforehand if we like it. And this book is very good. It's like I said, most of the pages have like at least 12 panels, so you're getting a lot of content in there. And even though there's no dialogue, there's a description on each page of the scene that you're looking at, so you don't really get lost. And it goes episode by episode throughout the entire series. There's a bunch of information in here that I'd never heard before, like how some scenes were originally planned to go in certain episodes, but were sort of ultimately shifted into the next episode, or characters doing something slightly differently in the original sketches than they ended up doing in the actual show. And the book often just devotes a little snippet from each scene, but it devotes several pages to the entire Battle of Blackwater, which I know Jacob would love going through, obviously. And there's another thing for you, Jacob. Game of Thrones military procedure and strategy and artwork. And all of these things are just like incredibly detailed and really, really showcase how essential it is for everybody to be on the same page for super complex filming sequences like this. So it's called Game of Thrones: The Storyboard, and or the Storyboards, and it comes out later this month. So check that out.
It sounds great. Just out of curiosity, Ben, have you read the book where it's a fake history of Westeros written as an actual like historical document?
No, I have not. No.
I'll figure out the title of it.
Is it A World of Ice and Fire?
A World of Ice and Fire. Yeah, it's literally overseen by George R. R. Martin and a bunch of other other writers, and it's literally just the entire history, front to back, of every location, house, castle, area of the show, but written as if you were actually reading a like ancient tome in like a Citadel library, as opposed to like a making of. And
that's very cool.
I think you'd enjoy it.
Book.
It's really cool.
Awesome.
Okay, let's move on to what we've been watching this past week. I spent a lot of time in the movie theater. I saw Endgame 3 times. I saw Detective Pikachu once, but I've already talked about both of those things on the podcast elsewhere. So let's talk about what I've been watching at home. For the longest time, I've wanted to subscribe to Masterclass, that website that they hire big people to give classes in the topics that they the industries in which they work. So I've Martin Scorsese teaches directing, Aaron Sorkin teaches screenwriting, Steve Martin teaches comedy. They have a ton, and I've been on the edge of subscribing because I think it's like something like $170 for a year of subscription. But Penn and Teller finally, they did a masterclass, so that pushed me over the edge. I subscribed, and I watched ingested the entire Penn and Teller masterclass within like 24-hour period, because these masterclasses are actually kind of short. At least the Penn and Teller one, I think, was like maybe 3 hours of videos in total, split up into these small bite-sized lessons. I am really impressed at how well produced these masterclass videos are. Like they're more well produced than anything I've seen in this kind of category, and I just wish there was more. Like I guess that's probably a good thing. I guess they're probably presenting the good stuff that they probably shot with these people for a week, and this is the good 3 hours, and it makes me want more. I know, like, and for this one in particular, Penn and Teller are teaching a lot of basic magic that would be good for beginners, but in their teaching, you're learning subtleties and theory that is insightful even for master magicians. I would highly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. I will rewatch it, and I'm excited to watch the other master classes. Chris, I know that you have been a subscriber to Masterclass. I think your wife got you a subscription or something.
Yeah, my wife bought me the Martin Scorsese class, which is great, and I also just recently got the David Lynch class, and I actually have a review of the David Lynch class up today on slashfilm.com. I like it a lot. It's really cool.
Are the other master classes as short as the Penn and Teller?
It depends. Some of them are. It goes from episode to episode. Like some episodes or lessons, I guess you want to call it, will be like 20 some minutes long. Some will only be 3, and eventually adds up to like a few. a few hours. Obviously for the cost, I'd love more, but it gives you a lot of like insight into, people you're fans of, like, being able to spend any amount of time with Martin Scorsese, having him just talk about, his process, or David Lynch is worth it for me. It might not be worth it for everyone, but I definitely enjoy it. And you can also, it's not as expensive. You can get individual classes, or you can get like the site-wide access. And I actually think the site-wide access is worth it because it gives you access to everyone, like every single class they have for just not that much more than an individual class.
It's the price of 2 classes, I think. That's what I went for, because there's just so many people on this service. There's even like Gordon Ramsay and like chefs and stuff. I've been very impressed by what I've seen thus far, but if I had one criticism, it is that expect to have a few hours with one of these classes. It's a 1-day seminar. It's not a master class. And I'm excited to see that Robert Irvine's Restaurant Impossible is back on the air. It's taken a few years off. This is like one of those guilty pleasure shows that I watch. It's reality television, but it's reality television at its best. It's a Food Network show, and Robert Irvine is a chef who basically comes into shithole restaurants and basically finds, the problem with the matter, which usually has to do with a combination of it being run poorly, and also that there's some kind of human problem at the core of it, and he's able, in the period of 2 days, remodel the entire business and fix the business. At least if you look at the TV show, if you actually do some searching online, not many of them are actually fixed. But I don't know, it's very enjoyable. That is back on there. I'm enjoying that. Chris, what have you been watching?
I watched a documentary called Screwball. I think this came out a little while ago, but I just got a screener from it from a publicist. This is a very funny documentary. It's all about the doping scandal in baseball, especially involving A-Rod. I don't really know a lot about sports in general, so I only had a general idea about this scandal. It came on the heels of all these baseball players were getting busted taking steroids, and rather than give up steroids, they found this guy in Florida who claimed to be a doctor, but he really wasn't, who was able to give them this cocktail that was meant to disguise the fact that they were taking steroids, and it would disguise things as long as they followed this specific regimen, but none of them could really stick to the schedule, and they all started getting busted one by one for still taking steroids. And what's this story is interesting in its own right, but what makes this documentary really fascinating and funny is it has all these reenactments in it, and in the reenactments, all the people involved with the scandal are played by children. So it's like kids, dressed up like adults with like fake tattoos and fake beards. And, it's sort of like Drunk History. Have you ever seen Drunk History, where the person narrating their audio comes out of the reenactor's mouth? So it's these kids lip syncing to these adults, like cursing and doing all this like ridiculous stuff, and it just makes the whole thing this like really surreal, funny story. And it's basically like it's the director's sort of not so subtle way of commenting on how all these grown men were acting like children, basically to get whatever they wanted. And it just makes for a very fascinating and very funny experience. My wife and I watched it over the weekend. We were laughing our asses off basically through the whole thing.
And where can people find Screwball?
I don't think it's out yet. It was in theaters a few months ago. It's got to be coming to Blu-ray or VOD very soon. It doesn't have an official date yet, but if you didn't catch it in theaters, it'll be out soon. I highly recommend that you check it out because it's a lot of fun.
Jacob, what kind of bad horror movies have you been watching this week?
Not a lot of bad horror movies. One okay horror movie called Monster Party, which is streaming on Shudder right now. It has an amazing premise, which is a group of low-rent thieves work as caterers at this high-class party in a mansion with the goal of robbing it. but what they don't realize is that the party they're catering is a reunion group of all recovered serial killers who've all gone through therapy and have all sworn off killing. And as you can imagine, things go wrong as the owners of the house, who are all serial killers, learn that there are thieves in their midst, and everybody starts falling off the wagon. And it's a great premise, and I wish it stuck the landing, and it really doesn't. It's extremely low budget. It has some recognizable actors like Julian McMahon and Lance Reddick, but the supporting cast really doesn't carry their own share of the weight. It's really mean-spirited, and in ways I don't think it earns. It tries to be a really fun Edgar Wright-esque, inversion of horror tropes, while also being like vicious and cruel in ways that never gel. I wish it worked. It's streaming right now if you want to check it out. It's not a difficult watch, but it's definitely something that I wish held up a bit more than it does. But for good things, I watched all of Big Little Lies. And Ben, you've watched this, right?
Yes, the show rules.
Anyone else here? Oh, man, Big Little Lies, I put it off for ages, even though my wife and Ben have been telling me to watch it, and it's so good. It's very soapy. At least it should be soapy, but in a way that works. It's Nicole Kidman, Reese Witherspoon, Laura Dern, and other actresses all play citizens of a very upper-class, 1% California town, and due to various social interactions gone awry, we learn in the opening episode somebody has been murdered, and the 7 episodes of the first season explore how that came to be. And it's not quite a thriller. It's more of a dissection of these characters and their interactions and the small town community where gossip and prestige go hand in hand. And I really enjoy where it went. I really enjoyed the performances, and I'm hesitant about season 2 because I feel like it ends in a pretty definitive way. But, when season 2 is being directed by Andrea Arnold and brings Meryl Streep into the cast, it's hard to argue against coming back for more. Ben, can you convince... it took me, my wife, and you to convince me to watch this. What can you say to our listeners to convince them to give Big Little Lies a chance?
Yeah, this is one where, I was kind of... I guess just because of the way that I grew up watching things, I was a little hesitant to come into it when I heard that it had this sort of soapy angle that it does, but it just works so well. Like the drama is, it may like dip into melodrama at certain points, but the performances are all off the charts. Everybody is doing such great work. The direction is so like crisp, and it seems like this show really has a vision, and it seems like there's no extraneous stuff at all. Everything is like pared down. This is the vision. This, everything is exactly where it's supposed to be in this grand, like murder mystery that takes place over the whole thing, and it's just so well executed on pretty much every level. And it's a beautiful show too. Like the cinematography is gorgeous, the editing is so great. I mean, it's like one of the premier prestige TV shows of the past few years, I think. So if you're interested in high quality television, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, I feel like myself and other people wrote it off because it was nominated for a bunch of awards. My partner was thinking, it's just soapy awards bait, starring a bunch of movie stars trying to get Emmys, and it's not. What it ends up being about, I found really moving and effective and necessary. And I was not expecting that. I was expecting some good, well executed trash, and I got a show that feels really relevant and powerful and right for a lot of things we're talking about in 2019 and beyond. Yep. In the opposite end of direction, I watched Escape Room, the new film by director Adam Robitel, who's been hit and miss, but I've generally enjoyed his other horror movies. And Escape Room came out earlier this year. It was a sleeper hit at the box office. It's getting a sequel, and it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. As the title indicates, it's about a group of strangers who get invited to a high-class, super-secret escape room experience and learn that each room is actually designed not to give them a fun time, but to kill them. So they're literally solving puzzles for their life in a series of rooms that get increasingly elaborate and increasingly dangerous. And it's not like a gore factory like Saw. It's not like relishing in watching these characters die. It's actually not particularly violent at all compared to other horror movies like this. But the performances are good. It's very clever, sometimes very funny. And I was really on board with the characters. And Chris, you saw this, right?
Yeah, I saw it. I reviewed it. I really liked it, except for like the last 15 minutes where it feels like they ran out of clever ideas and just like we're like, all right, we need to end this, and they just do a bunch of like really goofy crap that I don't really like. But everything else, it was so much like I was like, oh, this is gonna be like a Saw ripoff, and it is in a way, but it's so much better than it has like any right to be. The performances are really good. The set design is amazing. So while I'm not a fan of like the last 15 minutes, I do recommend this movie, and I am curious to see what the sequel does.
Yeah, I'm a Saw apologist, but I'd argue this is better than all the Saw films individually stacked together. Moving on, I rewatched The Matrix last night. It was on a whim. My wife queued it up and put it on, and I thought we'd be watching it the first hour and go to bed, but we stayed up late rewatching The Matrix. And this is the 20th anniversary of The Matrix this year. And that movie holds up, and it's gotten so much more interesting with age, and it's aged so well. I mean, even when there's a wonky visual effect here and there, the storytelling is so assured. And what we know about the Wachowskis now as filmmakers really is reflected even more in this film as being maybe one of the great LGBTQ movies of all time, disguised into like a massive science fiction blockbuster. So if you've been itching to revisit The Matrix and wondering if it's still good, The Matrix is good. And I also have a soft spot for the sequels, but they're not, as assured or as powerful or as beautifully thought through as the first movie. And man, I've forgotten how much I love this film and how much it belongs on the list of, goodness, the best science fiction movies ever made, the best action movies ever made. Keanu Reeves rules in it. I don't know why Carrie Ann Moss didn't become a huge star after it. And Lawrence Fishburne just chewing into that dialogue. I mean, I love The Matrix so damn much, guys. I think it's streaming on Netflix right now if you don't happen to own a physical copy. But the 4K disc is quite good looking, so I recommend picking that up. And finally, with the Deadwood movie coming out at the end of the month, I started a rewatch of the show. I haven't watched it in a few years with my wife who hasn't seen it and a couple of friends who've never seen it. And the first thing that struck me is that the Deadwood pilot looks really low rent. And I was really worried at first if my mind had been clouded and the show didn't look as good as I remembered. But starting with episode 2, Deadwood becomes such an incredibly great looking show. It has all the HBO quality. They built literally an entire western town full of working buildings so they can put the camera in so many interesting places. And David Milch's dialogue has been written about and talked about time and time again. But I love how the characters speak in Deadwood. I love how you have to genuinely pay attention to the order of their sentences and how they communicate. You can't be on your phone when you watch Deadwood. You have to genuinely be invested in every single scene, every single dialogue, which is easy enough because the performances are so good. I love the dynamics of the characters. And Ian McShane as Al Swearingen is one of the great TV characters of all time. And I reached a point in season 1 where, for those of you who don't know, he plays like a local criminal thug pimp character, but he's also forced to essentially become leader of the town of Deadwood in 1870s in the Dakota Territory. And at first because he wants to protect his profits, and second because he actually ends up being a really good community leader, even though he never really realizes that. And I just love this show because it's not just a western about shootouts. It's a western about how a bunch of random people have to create a community because that's how you survive and that's how you prosper, either for your own good or for the good of others. Deadwood is an incredible show. And if you haven't had a chance to watch it before the movie comes out on May 31st on HBO, it's all streaming on the HBO app of your choice. Go watch Deadwood. It is amazing.
Moving on, Brad, what have you been watching?
I watched some things. I watched the Beyonce concert documentary, Homecoming, a film by Beyonce. Shortly after it came out, my girlfriend is a big fan and wanted to watch it while she was here visiting around the time it came out. And it was a pretty cool glimpse at, not only how she prepares to do a big show like Coachella, but the performance itself was very cool. They did this really cool thing in the earlier part of the documentary because she performed twice at Coachella, and her and the entire marching band and dance crew that she had on stage with her wore 2 different outfits each night. And they did this awesome thing where at times they cut they cut from one shot to another, but their dance moves are so consistent and what they're doing is exactly the same that it looks like they're not cutting from a different night to another night of the performance, but it looks as if they somehow set it up so that their outfits instantly changed colors between shots. And so for the first 15 minutes, I was like, how the fuck did they do that? And I thought it was some kind of lighting trick, or something, where like they switched the lights and like maybe the clothing was some kind of material, like a blacklight kind of material, where they're able to change it like that. But then I went and looked it up, and I'm like, oh, okay, it's 2 different nights. Now I don't feel like I'm going crazy. But it's a very fluid edit for those shots, and it looks very cool. And yeah, she's a hell of a performer, and it's a very fascinating documentary that's worth watching if you enjoy Beyonce.
Yeah.
I also watched Legally Blonde for the first time ever. I had never seen it, just kind of always escaped me, never really cared about it. And it's on Netflix. And once I had mentioned that to my girlfriend, she's like, well, you should watch it. She's like, it's not like it's the best movie, but it's one of those it's kind of a quintessential, I guess, romantic comedy in that way. And it's a little bit weird going back and seeing this version of Reese Witherspoon, knowing like the kind of role she's taking now. And it's not that it's necessarily a bad movie. It's just so different. It's solid for what it is. I feel like it's maybe just by today's standards, because I've seen other movies like it since then, but it's fairly formulaic and predictable. But yeah, it was fine. It was fine. Does anybody here have any like reverence whatsoever for Legally Blonde?
I know HT does. She's probably steaming right now.
First of all, Legally Blonde is the feminist movie that, it's a very secretly feminist movie, because at first you think that this is just a typical cliched rom-com, as you kind of get the impression that it is, Brad. But it's actually a film that is about a girl who chases after a man and realizes that her self-worth is actually inside of she only needs to find it within herself, and it's not something that she needs to look for in relationships or anything else. And it's such a great depiction of a woman like finding strength in her compassion and her own like intelligence while having this great group of female friends. And it's a great movie, and you're wrong, Brad.
I think part of the reason that my perspective is like that is because the times have kind of changed so much since this movie came out. Because this movie came out in like 2001, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I think that maybe we just had so many like strong female characters and stories like that where, a woman doesn't need a man to define her and that kind of things, that this didn't feel maybe as fresh as it did at that time. So I do respect it for being a different kind of romantic comedy in that respect. But yeah, I don't know. I think comedy in general has kind of changed since then, because the movie feels kind of slow with regards to its comedic beats and how fast the jokes come. So yeah, I think it's really just a matter of just like maybe it feeling a little bit more dated than I was anticipating.
I could see that. I still think the dialogue is funny and sharp, but you're entitled to your opinion, even if it's wrong. I will say this is a movie that inspired my friend to become a lawyer, and I think inspired a lot of women to become lawyers too. So it's a really powerful film, regardless of how dated it is still.
Crazy.
Fair enough.
I wouldn't anticipate that film inspiring anybody to become a lawyer, but
yeah,
crazy. Brad, what else have you been watching?
I also finally got around to seeing The Curse of La Llorona. My mom is the one who I usually go see horror movies with around here, because she likes getting spooked. And because I myself am half Mexican and I come from a Mexican family, we definitely know about the mythology surrounding La Llorona. And I didn't love this movie, but I didn't hate it. It's fairly suspenseful, but it's also extremely formulaic. There's nothing really original about it, and the way it approaches La Llorona doesn't feel like it's worth the weight of the mythology that comes with the this spirit and like what she represents and embodies, and how sort of infamous she is in Hispanic culture. But I will say that the one thing that I did really like about The Curse of La Llorona was a character who I almost would have rather seen show up in a different Conjuring universe movie, because I think that actually Rafael Olvera, who's played by Raymond Cruz in the movie, is great in this movie. He plays the guy who basically helps Linda Cardellini and her family deal with La Llorona, and he's this very kind of stoic and like mysterious dude, but you get the sense that he's kind of like this badass spiritual warrior in a way. But he also has a little bit of like a sarcastic, wry sense of humor to him. And I really like that character, but I just wish he was in a better movie because overall it was fairly disappointing.
And have you been watching anything else?
And I saw what was this? I saw Life of the Party. That's been on HBO, and it is probably the best movie Melissa McCarthy has made with her husband Ben Falcone. But
Brad, that is like not an achievement.
No, I know. Trust me, because I love Melissa McCarthy. She's a fantastic actress. She's an incredible comedian. But whenever she makes a movie with her husband, it is usually awful. This is the best one she's ever done, and it's actually, I wouldn't even say that it's bad. It's actually pretty decent, but it still feels a little bit rocky, especially when it comes to some of the supporting cast. And some of the jokes don't land, but I think that it's probably the best movie that they've done together. And it's actually worth watching. It's definitely nowhere near as bad as something like Tammy or anything like that. And then this past weekend I took a break from seeing Avengers Endgame again, even though I will see it again, and I saw Long Shot, even though it seems like a lot of people didn't, which is unfortunate because this is actually a really good romantic comedy. Seth Rogen and Charlize Theron are fantastic in it. Charlize Theron honestly can do anything she wants to. She's incredible. Seth Rogen is probably the most charming I've ever seen him in a movie like this. They have really good chemistry. The script is sharp. It approaches the current political and social landscape in a way that is relevant and timely. It's very, very funny. It has the feel of an old school romantic comedy, just with some modern flares to it, and it makes me wish that they would still make more movies like this, and the Crazy Rich Asians and that kind of thing. There's this sort of timeless quality to a romantic comedy like this, and I wish that they would make more of them. So yeah, that's if you are looking for a break from the normal blockbuster stuff, go see Long Shot if you while it's still in theaters, because it's probably not going to stick around very long with all the other blockbuster movies taking screens coming up soon.
It's weird. It's a combination of that like romantic comedy that we don't get anymore, but then it still feels like they're like forcing the drug stuff and the outrageous like comedy beats at times.
It doesn't feel forced to me. I don't know. I didn't. I've seen some criticism of that. It feels like it's uneven, and that the two tones don't really mix well with each other. But I didn't feel that at all. I thought that it worked really well. And if anything, like I think that made it feel more relevant. That it wasn't trying to be soft about that stuff or tiptoe around these things that are definitely a part of of real life nowadays.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Long Shot. You can hear me and Ben talk about that in a previous version of the podcast. HT, you put Detective Pikachu as your number 3 movie of the year on the Summer Movie Wager. You have now seen the movie. Was it a good decision or a bad decision? All
right. Detective Pikachu is fine, but it will be a fine box office sensation because in some cases, the quality of the film doesn't exactly translate to how well it'll do at the box office. And I think that this is a movie that caters so heavily to fans and really takes their wishes and takes that the heart that comes with the Pokemon franchise and makes it and realizes that on the big screen. And with that, I think that's why it'll go to number 3 at the box office. But yeah, the movie itself was, mostly fine. I thought it was incredibly sweet and really adorable, especially the design of Pikachu and just like all the actions of all the Pokemon. They were like devastatingly cute. And the story itself is very just formulaic and a little bit it drags a little bit too, especially when it takes the focus away from the Pokemon and puts it on the protagonist, who is a little bit dull. But when you have scenes of Detective Pikachu just interrogating other Pokemon and having a ball, that's when the movie really shines, and that's when it takes that sort of fan service and that love for and nostalgia for the franchise and brings it to another level.
Well, I put it at number 4, and I'm worried after seeing it. But
people will see this movie, Peter, just like from seeing people's very angry reaction whenever reviewers gave a mediocre review of this. I can see those people shooting this movie to the top of the box office.
Yeah. Well, you did see a movie, which is one of my most anticipated movies this summer, John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. Yes. How is it?
Oh, it is so good. It lives up to all that anticipation and more. It is full of heart-pounding, bone-crunching action. It's visceral cinema at its finest. And I will say I liked it even better than Chapter 2 because it takes the focus on a much more smaller, like intimate scale almost, while being this big globe-trotting, mythos expanding film. It has a much sort of leaner structure to it because a lot of the film is just a big chase and it's John Wick evading his other fellow assassins and captors. And it just becomes so incredibly taut and focused. And Keanu Reeves is amazing in this. Asia Dillon, who plays the villain, is fantastic as well. It's Asia Kate Dillon. She's fantastic, as is Mark Dacascos, who is actually quite fun in this film as the other villain. He has a lends sort of twinkle to the role, and I think that they kind of elevate this film from Chapter 2 because Chapter 2, while I really enjoyed it and I loved how expanded that universe, I felt like the villains were a little bit lacking, but the villains here are just so incredibly charismatic and fun. And yeah, the action sequence is amazing. I feel like I'm overhyping this, but it's a film that was making me sweat 30 minutes into watching it. It was something that gave me a physical reaction. So make of that what you will, but it's a great film, and I think that it wholly deserves its place as most anticipated of many of our lists.
See, I feel like Chris needs to move over and allow Lionsgate to put that quote in the trailer. A movie that made me sweat. And for some reason, you also saw the new Ugly Dolls movie?
Yes. Much less enjoyable than both John Wick and Detective Pikachu. I wrote a review of this for the site. It's not great. It kind of is inexplicably a musical for a reason that I can only see. It's trying to get a top 40 Billboard hit and somehow merchandise this film in a way that it's even more manufactured to gain the attention of kids. It feels like it's a film that is made in an algorithm, and I just did not enjoy it. It felt very the animation was fine, but it felt very cheap to me and kind of symbolic of everything that's bad about the animation industry today, which is a little harsh, but it's not a great movie, so don't see it. If you do want to see some movies, I have a few highlights from the Tribeca Film Festival that I want to talk about. I saw about 16, 17 movies this year, but I'm only going to be talking about
5 or 6?
5 or 6, yes, I can count. The first one is House of Hummingbird, which is a South Korean coming-of-age drama directed by Bora Kim. It's set in the 90s, and it's this really lovely, quietly affecting film about this young 8th grade girl who is just kind of navigating her life, but it has some more dark, unseemly elements to it that kind of emerge because she comes from this working class family, and her family itself feels like they're something that is starting to fall through the cracks of society, and she deals with sort of these cycles of abuse and neglect that come with that. And it's a really great, really lovely, slow-moving film that reminded me a lot of one of my favorite films last year, Shoplifters. And it is a film that I think it's the best film I saw at the festival, and I highly recommend, if it gets distribution, to check it out at some point. Another film I saw that I really enjoyed was Lucky Grandma, which is a film directed by Stacey Seeley, and it stars Sai Chin as this sort of elderly grandma who finds herself down on her luck, and despite her fortune teller telling her that she's going to meet great fortune. And so one day she accidentally stumbles upon a bag of cash that gets her embroiled in a Chinatown gang war. And it's kind of this blackly comic, really screwball neo-noir that's with an elderly grandma at the center, and it's really stylish, really dynamic, and Sai-Chin is just so electrifying to watch. This is a movie that I really enjoyed, and that is kind of feels like a fresh twist on like that Chinatown set noir that we've seen so much of, yet take Chinatown as sort of like exotic backdrop, and here that Chinatown in New York feels very much like a living part of the movie. So that's a great film. And I also saw a film called Blow the Man Down, which is another debut film from Bridget Savage Cole and Daniel Crudy. It's about two sisters who accidentally find themselves at the center of this vast conspiracy of sex, drugs, and murder in this sleepy seaside New England town. And it's got this sort of cold, savage, Fargo-esque feel to it. It's got a great female-led cast, which includes beloved character actress Margot Martindale, and the two sisters at the center of it, played by Sophie Lowe and Morgan Saylor, are fantastic as well. This is a really great film, and kind of very Coen Brothers inspired, but gives a sort of feminist twist to it as in addition to that. And then I also enjoyed speaking of rom-coms, a rom-com called Plus One. It's directed by Jeff Chan and Andrew Reimer, and it stars Jack Quaid and Maya Erskine as two college buddies who strike up a deal to try to survive the summer wedding season by being each other's plus ones and wingmans at the separate weddings, and of course they end up falling in love. This is from the same team behind the hit Hulu series Pen 15. Maya Erskine is the star of that as well, and she's great in this. It has it's very influenced by When Harry Met Sally. It's really fun and witty, and has just this great affection, I think, for the rom-com that I feel like a lot of indie rom-coms don't. They're always trying to subvert it in some way, but this one I feel really is sincere and authentic in the genre that it's in, and I really enjoy that. It's really great. It won the Audience Award at the Tribeca Film Festival. And another film is a film called See You Yesterday. It's directed by Spike Lee protege Stephen Bristol. It's coming to Netflix soon, I think in like 2 weeks. And it's this sort of time travel, teen time travel movie with a Black Lives Matter hook, which kind of sounds a little bit strange, but it's about a girl who is a science prodigy who is able to invent time travel. And but after her brother gets killed in a bit of by police, even though he is unarmed, she decides to use time travel to go back and try to save him. It's very H.G. Wells' Time Machine meets sort of more kooky, like Back to the Future-esque shenanigans. There's even a Michael J. Fox cameo, which might be a spoiler. I'm very sorry, but it's a kind of fun nod to that the whole genre, and it has a more sort of lighthearted approach to things, even despite having a really timely, pun not intended, and powerful sort of themes to it. Really enjoyable. It's coming to Netflix soon, so if you want to check that out, please do. And lastly, I also want to highlight Burning Cane, which was the winner of the Narrative Feature Award at Tribeca. It's from a first-time director, Philip Uman, who is only 19 years old, but it's this hypnotic, mesmerizing portrait of this sort of dying community within like the Black South that is more of a tapestry of characters rather than an actual story. It follows these two families and this one alcoholic preacher. One family is centers around like this abusive husband and his son, and another is the preacher who is alcoholic, and then a mother who is connected to two of them. So it's very meandering, very just atmospheric film that is incredibly beautifully shot and feels Malikian almost in its cinematography and its real meditative stance on just life. So this is the last film that I recommend from the Tribeca Film Festival. Some of these films have distribution, some of them don't. I can't say which ones have them yet, but I know that See You Yesterday of all of these has a Netflix release set.
Yeah. Add them to your letterbox. That's what I usually do. I'm excited for See You Yesterday and Blow the Man Down. Plus One seems like it could be fun as well.
Plus One's really good. It's a surprising, very charming film.
On a different week, HT, we would have a whole podcast talking about the best of what you saw at Tribeca, but like this week it's just so packed.
It's packed.
Tomorrow we're going to have Ben talking about a set visit, so look forward to that. But right now, Ben's going to be talking about Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, I went and rewatched Avengers Endgame because yesterday I had the chance to speak with one of the visual effects supervisors. So look out for that interview coming to Slash Film on Monday. But yeah, I just wanted to sort of rewatch the movie because I'd only seen it once, and I know you guys are like, putting me to shame, see it in theaters like 5 or 6 times or whatever. So I was like, I should probably just watch this twice, so at least I have a good grasp on what I need to ask these questions about. And guys, this movie it really works. Like I'm still in awe of this film. I know that obviously it's like a mega budget thing, a corporate product in like the most blatant sense, but it also works so well on an emotional level that I just,
I feel like there's also like a feeling that like there's so much fan service in this movie, and then like it's like, oh, I'm gonna rewatch this later, and it's not gonna work. It's gonna like not hit me on that emotional level that it hit me the first time, and it doesn't. Like it still works every single time.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So I just wanted to give another shout out to that movie, as if anybody, as if that film needs any other shout outs. It's made over $2 billion already. So yeah, I saw that and it's still very enjoyable. I also rewatched John Wick Chapter 2 last night in preparation for the upcoming Chapter 3, which I think I'm going to be able to see on Thursday night. And I agree with HT. I think the villains are, in the first movie, you've got Alfie Allen playing this really like smug, punchable villain who kills John Wick's dog. And then in the second movie, it expands the scope around of the mythology and everything, and it goes global in a really cool way. But the villain in the second movie is just not very interesting. The stuff where John Wick fights Common's character, Cassian, is the best part of that movie. And like, I still love the moment where they're walking and just sort of like quietly firing guns at each other in a public place on like that multi-level as they're like walking through the train station or whatever. That's so great. So yeah, the action in that movie is terrific, and the visuals and everything, the colors in that movie just pop so beautifully. So I rewatched the trailer for John Wick 3 right after watching Chapter 2 and just got excited all over again. So I can't wait to see that. And then I watched A Simple Favor on the plane, and this back from London. I'm trying to think of who on this podcast has talked about this. I know a lot of people have.
I think HT
and I have talked about. Chris loves this movie. Yeah. I do as well. It's surprisingly camp and absurd and hilarious.
Yeah, Brad, have you seen A Simple Favor yet?
Yeah, and I also loved it too. I was surprised by how much I loved it because it is so deliciously twisted and dark and hilarious.
I thought I remembered you talking about it too. Yeah, so it was, the combination of all of you guys talking about this movie that I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And I ended up really, really enjoying it. I thought,
yes!
Blake Lively, who isn't, I mean, you guys have probably said this in your statement, so I apologize for repeating points that you've already brought up. But, she's an actress that has just never really left an impact on me, but she's so good in this role. And Anna Kendrick is so great in it. And the style of the movie is so great. The humor works really well. The only thing that I didn't care for was the actual climactic event that leads to the ending of the movie. Like the way that everything gets resolved at the end. I'm not going to spoil it because I want, hopefully, if anybody like me has been sleeping on this movie, I want to drive as many people as possible to check it out. But I think that the very, very end of the movie, it sort of drops the ball a little bit. But the journey to get there is so worth it. It just makes me want to see like 10 movies with these characters. And Henry Golding is like, son of a bitch, that guy is charming. Like, he is good looking and charming. He is like a full, he's like an exciting movie star, like an, out of nowhere movie star, the type that I feel like we don't get that often anymore.
He's Cary Granting hard in this film.
Yeah, he's so good. So anyway, yeah, just add me to the Simple Favor fan club with a small, concession that I didn't really love the ending. But
Ben, before you move on, I actually have I wonder if you would have enjoyed the ending more if they went with the original ending, which they recently revealed in a deleted scene was a Bollywood-style musical number.
Yes, I of course would have enjoyed that more. Yeah, that sounds incredible.
You have just spoiled the whole movie for me. Like, I now know that the movie does not end in a Bollywood-style musical number.
Is that scene online anywhere, HD?
I think it is. You
man.
have to look it up.
I'm going to look for that. And then finally, I caught an early screening of Tolkien, the movie I talked about earlier, because I went for that to London for that set visit. And this movie is surprisingly good. I watched the trailer and rolled my eyes so hard because the trailer leans on the influences of how Tolkien sort of, was inspired to write The Lord of the Rings. It's like, the word fellowship comes up, and like the imagery and the way that the trailer is cut together, it makes it seem like the whole movie is going to be him, stumbling into words or phrases or ideas that he would then go on to incorporate in,
like the whole Shakespeare in Love kind of concept.
Yeah, I've never seen Shakespeare in Love, but yes, from what I've heard about that movie, yeah, I was sort of dreading it from that regard. And the movie is really artfully done and doesn't really, I mean, there are a few of those moments spread throughout, but it's never as blatant as like in a music biopic when somebody just you know what I'm talking about. There's that trope where it's just like when you're making a biopic about somebody who does something famous, it just seems so even if it's actually based on real life, it just seems so stupid and so forced when certain things sort of fall into place like that. And this movie, it's more like a bubbling under the surface of the entirety of his life is leading up to, and his interests and his loves and the things that he's passionate about are what sort of coalesce into his work later on in life. So I would recommend seeing Tolkien if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings the love story between Nicholas Hoult and Lily Collins' character is really affecting, even if you don't love Lord of the Rings. It's not like it's a movie that, you have to know anything about that work to really get much out of. So I think it works, completely divorced from the knowledge of what he would write later on. But yeah, it's good. I think I'm going to write a review that should be up on the site later this week. So keep checking back for that.
Very cool. Let's move on to what we've been eating. I'll be very brief here. I tried out some of the new Diet Coke flavors. They've been coming out with new Diet Coke flavors. I tried the strawberry guava, which I really love. I'm a big fan of strawberry. And I also tried the feisty cherry, which I guess was last year's flavor, but I never tried it because I was like, oh, they already have cherry Coke. Like, why would I, what's different about this one? But then I learned that it actually is like this chili cherry flavor, and it has kind of like the spicy kick to it, and I really enjoy that, although I know some people hate it. Brad, have you tried this?
No, I'm not really a Diet Coke fan in general. I did try some of the new flavors when they came out last year because they sounded intriguing to me, like the mango one and the blood orange one, but I can't get past the flavor of Diet Coke, regardless of if you inject other flavors into it, so I haven't tried any of the newest ones. What
have you been eating this week, Brad?
I did find two other new soft drinks, though. Speedway gas stations. Do you guys have Speedway gas stations out there on the West Coast?
I don't think so.
Don't think so, no.
Okay. Well, so there's it's a pretty big chain, at least here in the Midwest, Speedway gas stations, and they have their own exclusive new Mountain Dew flavor as a fountain drink that you can get now. It's called Mountain Dew Cyclone. And it's basically like a citrus fruit punch flavor. It doesn't taste like Hawaiian punch. It tastes almost like a non-alcoholic carbonated sangria, I guess you could say. And it's pretty good. It's got a little bit of like some bite to it, but it still has that fruity flavor. It definitely tastes unlike any other Mountain Dew flavor that I've had before. But it's very good. So if you find yourself at a Speedway gas station, it's their exclusive flavor in their with their fountain drinks. And then Pepsi came out with some new flavors just recently that I finally found at the grocery store. I'm not getting there's 3 new ones, but I'm not trying all of them. I only tried one that I was curious about, because one of them is Pepsi with lime, which they released a while back, and it's just making a comeback. There's a one that has a blueberry flavor injected into it, which I don't really like blueberry as a flavor, so not my thing. But I did get the Pepsi mango one, which is surprisingly good. I'm always skeptical about how fruit flavors mix with brown cola, because it never really sounds all that appealing to me. But the Pepsi mango is actually really good. I think I actually like it more even than like the orange vanilla Coke. So yeah, those are out in stores. Should be roughly everywhere by now. They actually, much like the Diet Coke new flavors, they come in the thinner but taller cans in like packs of 8. So yeah, that's how you pick those up. And then I found a couple random things while I was just at various stores, whatever, getting groceries. Taco Bell apparently has their own new tortilla chips now, kind of trying to be Doritos, I guess. And what's kind of cool is the bags themselves are made to look like their sauce packets. And so they have a couple different flavors that are actually tied to their sauce packets. And so they have a mild one, which is the one that I got, and then they have one that is actually spicier, which is their fire sauce. And I think that they have just a classic one too, because I think they sell just their own plain tortilla chips in stores now. But I got the mild one. I was interested in it because my favorite Doritos flavor is actually the taco seasoning one, and I thought that this might be like that, but with the kind of chips that Taco Bell uses, like in their nachos. And it does have that taste at first, but then it starts tasting a little bit more like their sauce. And I'm not really a big fan of Taco Bell sauces, so this wasn't quite as good as I was hoping, but it wasn't bad. I feel like they would be good if you like crush them up and put them in a taco salad or something like that. And then I happened to find this Milka Oreo chocolate bar. If you don't know, Milka is a pretty popular chocolate brand overseas in like the UK and Europe and whatnot. And sometimes they get some of the coolest variations on candy bars, especially when it comes to mixing things like cookies with them. And they have a new bar that it's a bigger bar, and you can break it up into pieces, and each individual piece has like a mini Oreo inside of it, like wrapped in chocolate, but so that the surface of the cookie is actually like sticking out of the candy bar. And the combination of the Oreos with the chocolate is really good. It's even better than the actual Oreo candy bar that they you can find in stores. So yeah, that was a good chocolate treat.
Very cool. Let's move on to what we've been playing. I played a new game that I got this past week. Actually, a big crate showed up on my doorstep. I did an unboxing video, which I'll link in the show notes. This is for a board game called Batman Gotham City Chronicles. This is a tabletop miniature board game. And basically, the guys at Monolith Games that did this game called Conan, which is an incredible game. It's ranked, I think, in the top 500 of all time on Board Game Geek, but it's Conan, and I don't really care about Conan. But I do care about Batman. I was excited to get this game, and this game has, like, miniatures for almost every single Batman character you could possibly think of, down to Bat Cow, which is apparently a thing, and you can even play as the T-Rex that is in the Batcave, and they also have, like, the Batmobile. There's, like, hundreds of miniatures. Is ridiculous. There's, like, probably, like, over a dozen different sculpts of Batman. Like, you could play as the Dark Knight Returns Frank Miller Batman. You could play as, the Jim Lee Batman. Like, there's just tons of different ones, and I played with my friends. One person plays as the villains, controlling all the villains, and then each individual person plays a hero going against the villains. And it's just a lot of fun. I know this game is not available in stores. It's going to be back on Kickstarter next month sometime with a second season. I had a load of fun playing this, and I would highly recommend it despite it having a high price tag. It's just really cool, and I'm excited to get it to the table again. Brad, what have you been playing?
I finally got around to playing Spider-Man on the PlayStation 4, and it is every bit as good as I hoped. This game is so much fun. It is pretty much, it's exactly what I wanted because it's like the Spider-Man 2 Xbox game that was released so many years ago. It's like basically like a sandbox environment. You're Spider-Man. You can go anywhere, do whatever you want to. I mean, you can't like go randomly kill people because you're Spider-Man, and that's not what a Spider-Man game is about. But like you can follow the narrative if you want to, whenever you feel like finally going and progressing the actual story of the game, or you can just swing around and fight crime. There's tons of things around the city to collect and do. The way it progresses, like your combat introduces new moves and abilities and gadgets for your suit, as well as new suits themselves too. The game, it's just I love it so much. I think I've put in maybe like 5 or 6 hours in it so far. I'm like around 20% complete, I think, for the campaign. But it's just, I love this game so much. I'm definitely gonna be playing it for a while. I'll probably go back and play it like on a harder difficulty. But it's just, it really does just make you feel like, you are Spider-Man in this world. And like the combat stuff is so intuitive, and the way he moves and dodges attacks and retaliates, just it makes you feel like a pro crime fighter. And it's just so much fun.
Relish it, Brad. That game is glorious, and the story is so good all the way through. So just really relish it on your first playthrough. It's a special one.
And Brad, you've also been playing some mobile games?
Oh, no. Oh, sorry. No, not a mobile game. My cousin recently came and hung out here. And whenever he stays with me for a weekend, he brings his Nintendo Switch. And he brought Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which came out between the last time he had his Nintendo Switch here. So I was finally able to play that. I loved playing Smash Brothers when it was on the GameCube. And I played it for the Wii for a little bit as well. But it has been forever since I played. And so I was really curious to see if I could pick it back up. I used to be pretty damn good at it too. I'm not quite as good anymore because getting used to the Switch controls was a little complicated. But at some point, I think I would like to get a Switch, but also get one of the wireless GameCube controllers that they make for it now and play that way and see if I'm as good as I used to be on GameCube. But it's really fun. There's tons of new characters that you can be now, and there's new cool levels that move around and do lots of things to change the environment and really mess with the fights. But Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. It's really cool. It made me want to get a Switch, but I'll be so busy with Spider-Man for a while that I don't need one probably until they come out with a new one, which I heard is I think happening later this year.
Very cool. That brings us to the end of today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more of all of our work at slashfilm.com. You can find links to that Doctor Who VR film piece that HT did in the show notes, alongside a link to my Ordinary Adventures YouTube page. Check that out. You can find this podcast, Slash Film Daily, published every weekday on iTunes, Google, Overcast, Spotify, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send us your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to us at peter@slashfilm.com. And please rate and read this podcast on iTunes. Tell your friends. Spread the word. We'll see you tomorrow.
Hey, Peter.
Jacob, you're still here?
Yeah, I have a copy of the gargantuan book of insult, offense, and effrontery in front of me. And I have found the finest chapter of them all, the one that I think puts all others to shame.
What chapter would that be?
Tactless bores.
So that describes us?
Yeah, I think that these are perhaps the funniest insults I've yet to find in this book.
And that's saying something, because there have been some real knee slappers here.
Well, Brad, you're a rarely well-mannered person. Very rarely.
That's not even... Oh, I don't know.
Well, HT, we've all heard soup gargled and siphoned, but you yodel it. Chris, the way he drank his soup in a nightclub, 10 couples got up and danced.
Chris just hung up in response.
Well, Ben...
This is Chris's impression. No.
Ben.
Yeah.
Ben.
Yeah.
You eat with your fingers and talk with your fork.
I legitimately don't understand, but please move on and end this forever.
Well, Peter, that guy, he's as refined as a cabbage.
Wait, is cabbage not refined?
Jacob, you said this was going to be a good section of the book. This is terrible.
It was clearly the best section. Clearly, no jokes have ever been funnier than the ones just told.
In the history of man.
Or woman.